indie games nowadays, and I love the genre, so I'm not trying to negatively detract from it at all. But walking simulators are all over the place. Or a game where you walk, but what you do is you pick up a thing and you carry it over to the place and you put it in the thing, and that solves the puzzle. Like, and you're only doing one very basic thing for the whole game. So to make our joyful experience and that dream game that I had always kind of wanted to make, a key feature from start was about making sure there were always multiple options on the controller for what you could try, what you could see if that's the thing that solves the puzzle for you.
And when you mean multiple options, like again, as Aspen last in the last episode, we talked about Super Mario 64
Yeah,
and just like being able to somersault and like discovering that you could like do the backflip if you're like standing still and
yeah,
crouching and you do the super jump in Super Mario
totally.
Sunshine Center.
My
Is
favorite.
that kind of just for the audience? Is that kind of what you mean by like there's this liberty of being able to be like almost like a gymnast? I'm quoting. I'm in the context of Super Mario, of course, but that you have this liberty
Uh-huh.
to jump around, move around, but you're also things that you may not know. Like if you do a side
Yes.
jump or stuff, and then you discover that, and there's that kind of expertise building and novelty to finding something new, and then
And
applying
it's
it to the
also
world, of
Absolutely.
learning
course.
players.
Yeah.
Like that's what I last week when I was talking about like tutorialization without realizing that you're learning. If the player tries something and has fun with it one time, they'll try it again and they'll keep trying other things around the world. So I think what Cece's getting at and what's been really important for both of us from forever is just creating a world that is fun to interact with and that makes you go, I wonder what will happen if I dot dot dot. Um,
Hmm.
it is funny though because Cece actually often has to remind me that like it's okay if players aren't say standing exactly where I want them to be standing in my level when they shoot the target with their squirt gun. So really providing that like it can be really hard as a designer because you want players to have the exact experience that you put so much time and effort into. But that's where I really think designers as like servers come in. You're serving the player an experience. You're not don't get so married to like, oh my God, you have to be standing up on this platform to shoot this, or else you don't get the. Especially in a co-op game, there's a lot
Hmm.
of other tools. Players will be communicating with each other. Players will be experimenting more. Players will be squirting each other with the squirt gun and then discovering what happens when you do that. No spoilers, but this game was made by a pair of sisters, so try squirting each other with squirt guns.
Definitely. Yeah, I think just to piggyback off of what Aspen said, it is definitely about that sense of discovery, as well as giving the player an opportunity where certain mechanics require a little bit of mastery, and the game doesn't just hand it to you. So, for example, our squirt gun has an aim mode, and you can miss, and you have to aim, and you have to kind of get practiced and learn to gain skill at, I know how the water balloon is going to go in an arc when I launch it, so I know I should aim like this. That takes a little bit of skill development. And that skill development actually directly contributes to a player's feeling of mastery and a player's feeling of satisfaction at being good at your game. So our squirt gun is one example. Another example is our flying system. Um, our flying system is much like that game that inspired me. It is a physics-based glider where you can stall and you can crash and you can fail. You can get knocked out of the air and have to try again. And so, with that opportunity for failure at execution at something the player is doing, they feel better. They feel more engaged. They feel like it is their opportunity to succeed or fail. And
100%. I really feel that. I think a lot of games it comes with a complexity if you're going to try to allow as many open-ended ways of performing an action. So rather than standing on this specific
absolutely.
platform and aiming at this specific, like I don't want to call it laziness, but I do think it's a more streamlined way of building a world where these actions can only happen in this scenario. And when you open it up so much, like any sandbox game, and going back to the Super Mario example, um, it almost becomes harder because now you need to account for all these different variables of how people perform certain
Yes.
And for
actions,
new
and
players
QA
in our
testing
case.
comes in. Yeah. So
100%.
so with that, how do you get to the point where you have a strong demo? Like if you guys are building such an open kind of ended kind of gameplay loop where people can do lots of different things, and you may both of you together or your entire team may not be able to preemptively figure out what all the players will do with the actions you're giving them or the tools and functions. How do you get to the point where you're going to feel like it's a confident demo and it could be like tested for
Yeah.
players?
I think for us in particular, the reason that we targeted the section of gameplay that we did for our demo was actually because it was a little bit more linear. That made it a little bit more in reach to be able to accomplish in a reasonable time frame. So our demo is our tutorial level, and tutorial levels are very generally quite straightforward. Like they very much lead you from point A to point B to make sure that you're learning the skills that you're going to need to complete the rest of the game. This meant that the puzzles that we were creating for our demo were simpler than the kinds of puzzles that are in the level that Aspen's working on right now. That helped us reduce the scope as well as kind of contain ourselves and learn exactly how we wanted to accomplish the kind of puzzles that we ultimately now are creating for our more advanced level. I think actually something we discovered along the way and ended up feeling now post demo are incorporating even more is we did end up feeling like that tutorial level, like just retrospectively, is maybe a little teeny bit too long. That's actually something we're going to address when we return to that level to make the final version for the full release of the game. Is because it's so linear compared to later we have our spaces that are more like playgrounds where it's like you can try a bunch of different stuff and figure out what works. These are much more like do this to do that in order for it to happen the way we want it to. I think just that experiment and that experience actually helped us identify ways we can improve on the next iteration of our demo overall.
Totally. Yeah. I think something else for demos to keep in mind is for anyone listening who's working on one, the visuals really matter in a demo, which is another reason why we did decide to go with something a little bit more linear, because we only have one 3D artist, and also any of the like cutscenes that are in our demo are actually done in a tool called Sequencer in Unreal by CC and I. So we don't have like a cutscene artist or anything like that. So everything that went into the game, the four of us had to do, and knowing that and knowing how important visuals are, we did purposely set it up so you have to be on this platform so that you get the nice view of the really cool palm tree, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I will say that tricks, like when we looked at the level without any of the little like sequencers or really like gameplay actions and stuff yet, it did feel really empty and really unsatisfying. And we got a little worried for a bit there. But this happens with games. You're like, oh my God, my prototype is amazing. And then as soon as you get between prototype and finished, it all kind of gets really wiggly.
You get nervous.
Yeah. You have to really try not to overreact. So when we discovered that about our demo, that it was like dragging a little bit, the way that we kind of compensated for it was we added a lot more of that world interactivity and stuff. So even if there was only one goal that would progress you, if you just wanted to run around, you still could. There just wasn't as much interactivity. This is part of games, is learning things and being able to look at your own work with fresh eyes, which can be very hard, especially for us. Playtesting has obviously been a little bit of a challenge because it's a co-op game. So we haven't, ourselves yet even found all the ways that players can quote unquote break the game. And for us, it's kind of finding the line between how much of that we want to fix, like from a technical perspective, how much we have to fix, or from a players aren't understanding what's going on perspective, how much we have to fix, and then how much we kind of do just want to leave. Again, because the games that we are referencing very heavily do give you those more playground experiences. And with co-op, especially the type of co-op that we're building, that's just low stress, like low stakes, really fun co-op, you can also rely on players to make a lot of their own enjoyment. That's not saying that devs on co-op games can be lazy. I will actually say I think it's a little bit, it's just as difficult, if not harder, to design for two people. But you can rely on, if this hallway is a little long to walk down, your players will probably be talking to each other or squirting each other with a squirt gun or whatever.
So how do you get out of your heads, outside of your heads, in the sense that if you're developing a game, maybe I didn't phrase that quite right, but you're building a game and it's a two-player game. You're both kind of the initial or the visionaries for it. How do you make sure that there's a mantra in product, which is you are not the user, you are not the player. How do you guys get out of that spot where you're not building just a game for yourselves, but you mentioned, CC, at the start that there is a market, there are types of players that you're looking for. how do you make sure that what you're building is going to resonate, not just for you guys as the creators, but for obviously the audience that you're trying to target, or just the players that you see playing this?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think that that comment of like you are not the user, you are not the player has to be taken with a little bit of nuance. It shouldn't be a totally black and white statement because I think you should be making a game that you think is fun. I generally feel like people who are making games that they themselves are not personally compelled by, it ends up coming through in the game a little bit as far as like the just even the attention to detail on like the tiny things that make a difference to players. If you are the kind of player who would enjoy your game, you will notice if the jump feels right. You will notice if there's enough of a fanfare when you collect a coin, versus someone who really, really loves the FPS genre, for example, but doesn't really care about platformers. Would be like, I picked up a coin. Who cares? Like it disappeared. I got it. My counter went up. They wouldn't think about like, oh, it should slide towards me and there should be little sparkles when I get it. Like that type of attention to detail, I think, comes from a love of the kind of thing that you're the kind of experience that you're trying to bring to players. That being said, there's definitely an important nuance to that. For example, our game is really trying to be beginner friendly, and I tend to really enjoy technical high execution games. Like Hollow Knight is one of my favorite games. That game is not easy. The platforming's not easy. The boss fights are not easy. And the game that we're trying to make is easy. It's supposed to be easy. So a lot of times, I have to consciously tell myself like, that's a great idea, but it might be too hard for this experience. So I think it comes sort of in a shade of gray between I love the game I'm trying to make and I'm not the only person who should love this game. More than just me should love this game, but my love for this game will resonate with other people who love this kind of game.
One technique that they taught us in school, Cece also went to SMU Guildhall, so both of us have kind of gone through that program, was to basically make like a user story for your ideal user. So is this a kid who comes home from school and starts playing this game? Is it a dad who has a 6-year-old? Our neighbor has a little kid and he and his son are going to play test our game so that we can see what that experience is like. It is important, at least for me, for the type of design that I do, to have in my head that slight like narrative about the person who I am designing this for. I'm exposing myself as a theater kid here, but like yeah, it's a little bit of like a character. Like you put on the mask, you act a little bit. Like with what Cece just said with the difficulty. Like when I'm playtesting Cece's stuff, a lot of times I will purposely play a little bit worse, because I know that our target audience doesn't play games necessarily with the same execution level that I do. Like ideally, this is the kind of game that we could bring to Thanksgiving and play with our grandfather, and so I have to be our grandfather, and it's a lot of that is about remembering what it was like to either be that age or be in that mindset. I think a lot of it too is just if you are designing a puzzle, immediately cut off the hardest 30% of the puzzle because it won't be obvious to players outside of your head at all. There are things that I'm like, oh, that rope like literally connects the two things that you're supposed to do. And CC wanders around the room for like 20 minutes looking at what to do. So
Yeah.
it is important. And yes, I would say the most common thing, and it happens a lot with indie projects, is that games are more difficult than their designers think they are. And that does, in my opinion, come a lot down to playtesting and to deliberately trying to test your game like one of your players. If we were making Hollow Knight, we would have to play our game like as intensely as a Hollow Knight player would. But because we are making this more beginner friendly experience, both of us have to kind of tone it back a little bit. And again, just be a designer who's in service to your player, not making your player in service to you.
One other quick comment is I think a lot of games, particularly games at a higher budget level, have a necessity of selling a certain number of copies in order to recoup the investment. For us, we're operating on a teeny tiny team intentionally so that we can make something that's very focused on the type of experience that we want to make. And something that has a much larger budget and that need for a broader appeal ends up almost watering down its individual identity in order to appeal to more people. versus a tighter, focused experience, which might not appeal to everybody, but the people it appeals to, it will appeal to more strongly than something that's watered down. So it's all about striking the balance with your production goals and your production scale.
But it's also about like being an artist and wanting to, like, I think you made a really good point. You want to build a game that's fun, that you find fun, that hopefully is in its own specific way of being fun, with its own specific, or in this case, kind of lower level of difficulty, more appealable to like grandfather or maybe a younger child that's looking for like the magic in games. I think that's important because so many games nowadays are for everybody, and like they're free, freemium, right? Like download it, just try it, you might like it.